Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello, let me introduce myself first. My name is Salsha Veronica with my student number 2211420019.
My name is Alvionita Zyahwalian Prasetya with student number 2211420026.
And now, me and Alvionita will represent our summary about.
Of Mice and Men. Please enjoy.
The story opens with George Milton and Lenny Small traveling together along the Salinas River in California to find a work. The first one is George. He is small, wiry, and sharp-featured, while his companion, Lenny, is large and awkward. Lenny likes to pet soft things. In his pocket, he has a dead mouse which George confiscates and throws into the weeds beyond the pond. Lenny retrieves the dead mouse, and George once again catches him and gives Lenny a lecture about the trouble he causes when he wants to pet soft things. Because Lenny touched a girl's soft dress and she screamed. Lenny offers to leave and go live in a cave, causing George to soften his complaint. As the two men sit down to eat, Lenny asks for ketchup. This request launched George into a long speech about Lenny's ungratefulness. George complains that he could get along much better if he didn't have to care for Lenny. He uses the incident that got them chased out of wit as a case in point. Lenny, a lover of soft things, stroked the fabric of a girl's dress and would not let go. The locals assume he raped her and ran them out of town. George feels sorry for losing his temper and apologizes by telling Lenny his favorite story, a plan for their future happiness. As night falls, George tells Lenny that if he encounters any trouble while working at the ranch, he is returned to this clearing, hide in the bushes, and wait for George to come. The next morning, George and Lenny arrive at the ranch and go to the bunkhouse. The old swamper, Candy, cleans up around the ranch despite the fact that he is missing a hand. Candy tells the men a little about the boss and how he mistreats the stablebuck when he is angry, since the stablebuck is African American. The boss then enters the room and begins interviewing. He is angry that the men didn't arrive yesterday when they were supposed to. George answers all the questions for Lenny, causing the boss questioning why Lenny silenced. Suspicious of their partnership, the boss asks George why they left their last job. George explained that the work was done. Then George explains with his lies and says that Lenny is his cousin, who was kicked in the head by a horse when he was young in order to explain Lenny's lack of intelligence. Satisfied, the boss leaves, telling them they can work after supper on Slim yesterday. The old swamper returns with an old sheepdog. George asks Candy about his dog, and Candy says he raised the dog from a pup and that he was a great sheepdog in his younger days. Curly, the boss's son, enters and sizes up George. Looking at Lenny, Curly fists his hands and assumes a fighter's stance. He wants to know if they are the new guys, and when George answers, Curly insists that Lenny must talk when he is spoken to. Lenny repeats George's answer softly. Satisfied, Curly leaves to go look for his father. With Curly gone, Candy explains that Curly used to be a lightweight fighter and now he hates big guys, and picks fights with them. Candy leaves, and George tells Lenny to stay away from Curly and not speak to him, and reminds Lenny of the place by the river where he is to go in case of trouble. Shortly after, Curly's wife comes into the bunkhouse, claiming to look for Curly. Fascinated, Lenny can't take his eyes off her. Then Slim enters and tells her he saw Curly go into the house. Curly's wife becomes apprehensive and leaves. Another man, Carlson, enters the bunkhouse and asks Slim about his new puppies, suggesting that they could replace Candy's old dog, who is old. Carlson suggests that they give a new puppy to Candy, so that he can shoot his dog and get rid of it, since it is so old and smells. Lenny gets a puppy from them. He tries to sneak it into the bunkhouse under his jacket one time, but George forced him to return it to its mother in the barn. Slim and George talk about Lenny, and George confesses some things to him. George says he takes care of Lenny because he grew up with him and knew his Aunt Clara. So when she died, let Lenny come along with him. George tells every story about Lenny to Slim. Carlson enters and complains about the smell of Candy's dog. Offering to shoot it, Candy looks to the other guys, particularly Slim, for help with his decision. Slim sides with Carlson, and so Candy lets Carlson take the dog out for execution. Curly enters and looking for his wife. When he hears that she isn't there and that Slim is in the barn, he goes to the barn. Candy overhears about Lenny and George's discussion and offers to contribute some money toward the cause if George and Lenny will let him join them. George eventually agrees, and then the three men muse on what their place will be like. They agree to not tell anyone of their plans. Candy admits he should have shot his dog himself. Slim is angry at Curly for constantly asking about his wife. Curly, on the defensive and looking for someone to fight, picks a fight with Lenny and punches him. Lenny doesn't protect himself until George tells him to fight back. When Lenny does, he crushes all the bone in Curly's hand. Slim says they must get Curly to a doctor, but he cautions Curly that if he tells on Lenny and gets him fired, they will spread the word about how Curly's hand really got hurt and everyone will laugh at him. Curly agrees not to tell. Candy joins them in the bunkhouse, followed by his old dog. And Carlson starts bothering him again about shooting the dog. Candy doesn't want his dog to die, but he finally agrees to let Carlson take him. Candy lies rigidly in his bed until the men hear the sound of the gunshot signaling the dog was dead.
Lenny came into Crook's barn because Lenny saw the light was on, and all the other men were hanging out together in the town because it was Saturday night. At first, Crooks tried to push him away, but then he accepted Lenny into his barn. They talked for a while, and Lenny mentioned about the puppies, the rabbits, and the ranch that he and George were aiming for. Crooks told him that they were crazy for dreaming about having their own ranch. Candy then appeared outside the barn, looking for Lenny. Crooks invited him in, and the three of them talked about the ranch even more. Even Crooks got interested, and he asked if he could join them. But Curly's wife suddenly appeared, looking for Curly. She talked to them, but the men were uneasy of her presence. Curly's wife told them that she hated it when men kept avoiding her and told her to stay put in her house. She asked about Curly's arm and what happened to him, but the men didn't answer her. She then noticed the bruises on Lenny's face, and because Lenny was unable to answer her right away, Curly's wife figured out that Lenny was the one who beat Curly, and that Lenny got the bruises from the fight. Candy then told Curly's wife to get back to her house because the other men were coming back. After she left, George came looking for Lenny and surprised that he was in Crook's barn. George then told Lenny to come back to the bunkhouse, and Candy followed. Before Candy left the barn, Crooks told him that he changed his mind and wouldn't come along with George, Lenny, and Candy for the ranch. On Sunday afternoon, Lenny was in the barn with a dead puppy on his lap that he killed unintentionally. He already planned to hide the puppy when Curly's wife caught him. At first, Lenny avoided her, but when Curly's wife changed the subject, he got distracted and started to talk about the puppy. Lenny mentioned about the rabbits, and Curly's wife asked why he was so obsessed with rabbits. Lenny explained that he liked to pet nice, soft things. Curly's wife said she could understand him because she liked to stroke her soft hair. She then allowed Lenny to touch it, but then he started to ruin it, and Curly's wife told him to stop, but he didn't listen. Curly's wife started to scream, and Lenny, who was panicking, held her mouth and shook her to stop her from screaming, but he accidentally broke her neck and she immediately died. Lenny remembered what George had said to him if he made a trouble, so he went to the bush by the river. Moments later, Candy found Curly's wife's dead body and called George. George knew right away that it was Lenny who done it, even if it was unintentional. George then told Candy that he would go back to the bunkhouse and Candy would call for the other men after George left, so they would think that George had nothing to do with Curly's wife's murder. After Candy called out for the men and they found Curly's wife, Curly got so mad. He went to take a shotgun and brought the man with him, planning to kill Lenny.
Represent our summary about of Miss and Men.
Slim assured George that they would try to calm Curly down so he wouldn't kill Lenny. Lenny arrived at the bush waiting for George. He then started to have an imagination of Aunt Clara and the rabbits scolding him. Not so long after, George found him and they talked. Lenny asked if George would scold him like he always did whenever Lenny got them in trouble. And George did scold him half-heartedly. Lenny asked if he should go away, but George wanted him to stay with him. They then started to talk about their dream of having the ranch. George told Lenny to imagine the land of their ranch, and then he shot him at the back of the head. The men found them, and seeing Lenny's dead body, knowing that George had killed him, Slim comforted him by getting a drink together. The other men didn't expect seeing Slim would be so close with George in that way. So that's the story of Mice and Men. We hope that you enjoy it. Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.